Hi, Ngatia. I'm sending this from the other side. We made it alive. As I write this, I am 28. It is September, so I just transitioned into that upper echelon of the year. I know you're wondering. I'll answer. Yep. Shit's adult as fuck. You would know nothing about that. Right now, you're obsessed with proving how much of an adult you are. Poor boy. My sweet summer child. A decade later, I still feel like a child learning how to walk in that shonge-infested plot and between Shosho's cowshed and father's compound. You know a lot about being a child forced to operate in adult terms. It's all you've ever known. Even now, at 18, you know everything there is to know about everything. You also know nothing Jones know. You're taking a trip to Malindi with your classmates, second year, Kenyatta University, the ones with it enough to be part of SNS, Sisi, because why not? Right? You're in one of those swanky modern coast oxygen buses headed for a research trip. Giriama, music, culture, beach, sun, responsibility. You're the youngest on the crew. Almost everyone is well into their 20s, yet they leave you with all their return tickets to plan how they'll get fed for a week and where they'll sleep. Hold on tight. You have no idea what you've kickstarted. Life is about to engage nitrous. Oh yeah, that decision you made that Shosho's phone calls are the only ones you'll be picking up during rehearsals, stellar. When she visits the new house in Githurai Kimbo, she'll pass on her memory of Nyobayamu Arewito, all while making a fuss about how she only sings Nyeboshi Akira Hona Siakogosha Mwadhani. But you know her. She cannot resist a cue to reminisce on the days Naomi Jelly Mwale wa Mwagi used to win rams at dancing competitions left, right, and center. Of course, it was back in Larry, before the state of emergency, before the war, before the night of long knives, before the massacre, before the Iran, before Timao, before you. You're teaching SNS Nyobayamu Arewito at the Kenyatta University Bishop Square. You all have new passports, working like crazy. The world is finally opening its arms. Shosho calls. She's over the moon. Heard you were going Roraya, Turkey, you tell her. To sing and dance, you tell her. Like she used to, you tell her. Before the war. You tell her you can't promise to win a ram, but you won't disgrace her. It doesn't matter how many people, including friends who really should know better, decide that your dancing is the best thing to target to break your self-esteem down to a pile of debris. You eventually stop dancing, but not yet. Right now, this night, the wind thrums through the football and rugby fields, past Cassandra Walk to whistle down the trees before lunging for freedom over the hills of Ngong hostels. It whispers ancient poetry around you. Steve cracks a joke, Owiti tosses a response, Mato starts then stutters, Gladys shuts him down, Masido backs her up, Kim explains Steve's jokes to Manu, Frida laughs at Manu's slowness, Bill joins in the laughter, Nyawera sneakers, and that's it. The entire stage explodes into one of those pure fits of laughter and joy that line my university memories like gold in kintsugi. Shosho laughs on the phone too. She calls you Monyowaiyaki with a voice dripping with mischief. It is a joke she's run on you since you timed your earthly debut. Around the same time, a descendant of Hinga was losing a by-election. She reminds you that all she's ever wanted from you is for you to take that turn at Musheke Hill one day on a Pajero so that Barea Kihato can see the fruits of her labor. Maybe say hi to Ninadiki so she can see your suit. She's always been so sweet. Give Isaka a lift since he's the only elder close to your grandfather's age that is left. You have to make your 3-point turn. I mean, how else would you know that her husband was Derefa Goroyashu Mashiatene at Ninaki Mumu's gate? Make sure Noa Ngatia as gratitude for all the Sundays Kimumu's car ferried your cousins, your friends, and you. Kids so numerous they almost burst out of the van's windows to church at Kwamumero. She tells you she'll send something for fare, so you can stop waking up at 4 a.m. to make donuts to raise ticket money, since Kenyatta University has refused to acknowledge that you are its student so you can get corporate sponsorship. You realize telling her that Kim is making juice and Alex is selling smokies won't really make your case any better. She sends M-Pesa. The call the next day finds you in the corridors of Ngong hostels. It's your father. Mwarewa Mwagi is gone. A chasm you will try to fill with everything possible in the following years cracks open deep within you. You do not know it yet, but from this moment on, you're homeless. Rudderless.
So 6 pages. Definitely the longest letter that we have received ever since we started shooting. Have you written a letter to yourself before?
Well, I leave notes for myself in some of the books I buy myself, but not this kind of letter. First of all, who still writes letters? Tuongee tu kweli tuanze hapo bwana. Like, I know email to your younger self doesn't sound as nice, but yeah, no, I haven't written. This just shows me I really need to get back into therapy.
How did it feel writing the letter to yourself?
This was a difficult letter to write. I'll be honest. I think it took like 3 months to write because I was running. I knew what I wanted to write, but I was running around it a lot because it has a lot of pain moments in it. And I stopped a lot of times, especially I remember writing that the section with the memory of the phone call with my grandmother. I started crying at some point halfway. I was like, but there's also, I guess, a freedom in putting a lot of those feelings into words, because a lot of them are things I've carried for, say, a decade. And there are things I'm saying in that letter for the first time to even the people involved and the people I'm mentioning. So, but yeah, it does feel a bit cathartic.
Yeah, it felt like a form of release in some sort of way. Yeah. So when you begin your letter, you say that you felt as if you had to prove that you were an adult, that you're now a grown-up.
Yeah.
Is there anything that happened, maybe perhaps like as you're growing up, that made you feel like you had to grow up perhaps faster than your peers?
Oh, 6 pages. How long does this run? a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just list the top 36. So number 1, top 3. For a long time, I was the youngest in my class. I turned 5 in class 1. Like I was one of those January babies. Like my birthday falls right after mid-month, and like watu wamelipa school fee, nini, Christmas. Like when uchumi has hit properly, that's when it's like, uko na birthday. Hi. That found me in class 1, and I think until I was in Form 1 or Form 2, I'd never been in a classroom where everyone wasn't like at least 2 years older than me.
Yeah, that's actually young, because I was 6 in class 1 and I was always the youngest.
See?
So 5 in class 1 was pretty young.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And no one tells you.
Yeah.
No one tells you, like, there's like social factors here. I mean, you would not understand social factors at 5. But no one tells you there's a weird, strange thing that happens when the people you spend most of your days with are just like just a step ahead of you, right? Because you're always playing catch up, and no one gives you the grace, right? Or if you're given the grace, it's in a nijuni mtoto, right? And where I grew up in Timau and in Merwitz, you don't want to be that kid, right? So there's that. Number two, I come from a very complicated family that's broken on several parts. And my biological dad disappeared several times, but finally when I think I was 6 or 7, and I was my mom's only child for a while until my sister showed up. That also played a very, very big role in getting me into that feeling. And I think that one is been getting a bunch of diagnoses in the last couple of years, and it's weird when you start mapping out, understanding your mental health, right? Because suddenly things you thought were your personality traits would not learn any symptoms. And that can be very disorienting, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very obsessive with things, which I'm learning now is part of my ADHD. But it means I really don't know how to leave things, and then I might be running a project for 10 years, but mwisho nitakuwa like nakumbuka ile kitu nilimaliza. And two, I don't know how to stop. But like, it's a cycle. So I'm very curious, and then I'm very obsessive. So it feeds each other, right? A result of that is I very often became the kid presenting the homework. I wasn't good at doing the homework, but ikifika sasa, sawa, twende, right?
Yeah.
So I've found myself in a lot of, I'd say, accidental leadership positions. And then the constant theme in my life is like, Jesus Christ, how did I end up here now? What do I do? So that also contributed a lot. Yeah.
And you talk about your grandmother a lot in the letter.
Yes.
Is it your maternal or your paternal grandmother?
My maternal grandmother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of points where you mentioned, there's one time, in the letter where you mentioned reminiscing with her and reminiscing about like the state of emergency. How was that like for her? What stories did she give you about that period in her life?
It's funny because I grew up, I would say, in my shosho's compound, right? Because of the situation at home, we'd move a lot. And I was also in boarding school for a huge section of my life, so a lot of those points in between would be spent in shosho's farm. With lots of cousins, no electricity. I want to say no running water for the NGOs, but it's strange because we had running water. Only it was running water for the shamba, right? So like we had sprinklers on, but I met up tap a few years ago. I will not say it on your podcast. So she would tell us a lot of, so evenings were for stories and learning songs. Sana sana Kikuyu Christian songs. Like I may not be good at karaoke, but praise and worship. And a lot of the stories were from her past, which I mean to us was long as hell. She happened to, so Timau is a very interesting town because a lot of the people are not natively from there. So my grandparents moved there around the independence period. They were a result of colonization and the emergency because they were from such totally different parts of I would say Kikuyu land, just for the context of that time. Because my grandfather was from deep in Nyeri and my grandmother is from Kiambu, like right next to Nairobi. But in the early 50s, my grandfather was already married. Had like 3 kids. In Nyeri, they hadn't met. My grandmother was living her best life, right? Winning the Rams and dancing and all that.
Yeah.
But as a result of a series of That would be a long story. Oh yeah, people should come to our show for there's a section there about a bunch of decisions that settlers make that ended up with my shosho now living
in Timau.
In Lari. Right? So in Lari, the most famous massacre in the Mau Mau period happened in Lari, right? So it was like a set of massacres. The Mau Mau came and killed loyalists, and then the British came and revenged. So they basically assumed, I mean, if they killed loyalists, who's left? And then they used the results, so both their killings and the British killings, they took all those pictures and sent like press releases worldwide. And that's how the Mau Mau was introduced to the world, right? My shosho was in that village. After the first killing, her family and a few other families escaped, right? And the others who were left were convinced that the British were not going really to kill them. And that's how she ends up finding her way into meeting my grandfather, who's arrested, who goes into the forest as Mau Mau, is arrested. A lot of things happen, but by the time he's coming back out, the British have killed his first wife and youngest child. So he's forced to now get another wife. That's how he meets my grandmother. Now, so a lot of my grandmother's stories are from that time. But the strange thing is this. We're not really interested in them. Like, no, really scary, and the stories Shosho kept telling, right? And then after she passed on is when my work led me to that point. I was reading about all that stuff and be like, Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's actually really, really crazy because when you think of those colonial times, it's very easy to think Nikitambo, like it happened such a long time ago, but
also you're like, there's no it's affecting me directly.
But it is. It actually really is.
Yeah.
So you go to KU.
I go to thank you
You're
for
now
shifting
acting.
away from history because that's a terrible rabbit hole. I go to KU, I'm now acting.
You're now acting, and you decide that your grandmother's phone calls are the only ones that you're going to be picking.
Yes.
How did you come to that decision?
Because I really, really loved her.
Yeah.
Also, my grandmother is not the kind of person you leave missed call for. Rehearsals, what are rehearsals?
Yeah.
You rearrange your life for her. So it's both of those situations. She wasn't the kind of person who you would not pick up her calls. Like that, she wouldn't take that, right? But not in a terrible way. But at the same time, she'd been such a force in my life. I think she still is.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any other person at that time I would have rearranged my schedules for. Yeah, it doesn't get deeper than that. It's just,
Never to you loved her.
Yeah, I loved her, and also she didn't take nonsense.
Yeah, and she loved dancing. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that where you picked up your love for dance?
That's where I picked up my shamelessness. Yes. I don't know where my love for dance came from, but the ability to not care what the people who are watching are thinking. I got that from her.
And how did the competition go? The Turkey one? Did you guys win?
We didn't go.
You didn't go?
We didn't go.
No.
We didn't
what
go.
happened?
Well, it turns out selling smokies, jewels, and donuts
it
doesn't
didn't cut
raise close to 2 million.
Yeah.
So we didn't go. We tried to appeal to Kenyatta University. They ignored us for a long time. Our department tried where they could. Dr. Mugubi, our acting lecturer, Dr. David Mulo, got us, got Coke to agree to sponsor us, right? By unofficial conversations, right? But for it to be official, you had to actually say that we're students. We're not just purporting to be students. I think they pampered us for 3 months.
So you didn't get to go.
Yeah.
Okay, that's sad.
That sucks. That sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks. Yeah, it sucks because KU didn't need to give us money. They just needed to say that we were the students. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't really talk about your mom and your sister a lot in the letter. What was your relationship like?
My relationship with my mom and sister is the most present one in my life. I think I intentionally avoided it because it's what I talk about the most. With my mom, it's interesting because it's, again, the most present relationship of my life, but it's also continuously evolving. We spent, I mean, I wanted to say naturally, but I hope it's naturally, a lot of time together when I was growing up, especially since she was raising me alone. Apart from the time I was in my shows or in school. And we haven't spent as much time together in the last like 10 years as I've been coming into my own as an adult. And so navigating that switch is, it's interesting. Like, it's painful in some times, it's wonderful most times. For my sister, it's amazing because she's now a teenager. She's 16. She's like learning a lot of things about the world, about herself, about being a feminist. About, like, watching my sister grow up has been the most beautiful thing.
And at some point in the letter, you mentioned getting a phone call that your dad had passed away. Was it your grandma who had called you?
It's the other way around. So my dad called me to tell me my grandma had passed away.
Ah.
Yes. See why you should edit drafts? 'Cause I didn't. That's part of the reason it's so long.
Yeah.
What's that quote? I should have used this to answer your first question. It's more intelligent. And then I don't remember the quote. Someone was like, I'm sorry for sending such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. I should have thought of that. So it's my dad, so my stepdad, it's just very weird saying that, but so my mom remarried at some point, so my dad, who raised me, calls me the day after the night I described where we had the phone call. So we had a phone call, then she sends me M-Pesa, we finish rehearsals, I go home, come to school the next day, and my dad calls from the blue, and it's terrible at breaking news. So he just tells me in Kimeru, like a very casual, Mwari Mwangia Gwetwa. I'm like, what? And then he said, so he was saying something I was just registering, because it's a metaphor. He didn't actually say she's dead, he just said she's been called or someone. So as I was registering that, he was saying other stuff that I don't remember, but yeah, that's that.
Okay, so you mentioned that after your grandmother's passing, you felt a bit homeless. So why is that?
Oh yeah. I think because throughout my childhood, my grandmother's compound and her farm, her house, is actually, I think throughout my entire life is the one home I was assured of. Even before I started understanding what the idea of home is, and because we'd move a lot, so I don't have the childhood friends I hear people talking about. You know, I've known this person for 21 years, or like my first friend, and they're still here. I have people I kept in touch with. I have people I tried to reestablish contact with, or who tried to establish. I respect them a lot. Like, you know, unatokeanga bwana interview tu moja on TV, suddenly, like 36 people from your class 7 class remember your number, which is dope. But after my show, I'm running from answering your question. I think for a long time, I assumed that once I moved out, had my own place, set my own rules and all that, then I'd know what like being home is like. There's going to be a lot of referencing in this entire episode. So there's this BJ the Chicago Kid song. It's an album actually, so I think it's at the beginning of the album. The intro is, he has a short monologue where he talks about the idea of home and what it means to him, and to him it's when he gets to that, well, Americans call it a gas station, a petrol station right before home, and suddenly you can like relax. You're no longer in that dealing with the world phase. I thought I'd get that once I moved out. Then I didn't. And I realized, oh goddamn! First of all, your house just becomes where you bring all your battles. Then second, it's not really yours. Your landlord could show up any day, right?
So basically for you, it's like your grandma was your home.
She was my anchor. I just didn't know yet. Yeah, it's one of those peculiar, you don't know what you have until you lose it. I didn't know that my grandmother and everything around her was my home until I no longer had her. Yeah. 2012. 10 years ago, Kenyatta University. SNS does everything. Traditional dance, research, poetry, acting, filmmaking, stage, page, name it. You've just gotten an opportunity of your lives. To perform at the Storimoja Hay Festival. Long KU holiday makes it easy. You're broke as fuck though. So you rehearse at Arboretum for months. Then perform at the festival. Twice no less. At the National Museum courtyard on a freezing September night. In one of the performances, you carry Wanjiku Mwaura on your shoulders. Manu whacks the drums senseless. Mad that Mato has bailed on us yet again. Bobby, with his asthma, looks ready to meet biblically accurate angels. That might also be where Tony decided to live in the editing suite. There's this picture taken in the tents after the performance where you all look radiant. Don't believe it. You were exhausted and exploited. You just did not know it yet. After the show, you will walk up to the organizers because they trusted your people would deliver, and you all did. You all trusted that they would pay everyone. They did not seek to see every aspect of your performance, so you did not think it necessary to confirm every coin they were meant to pay you. You still believed in that conduct thing they teach new Meru initiates. This is Nairobi, boy. They hand you 5,000 Kenya shillings. You look at Samoa and swear on your grandfather's grave that if you're ever responsible for a show that has as many as the 500 you estimate, people in the audience, none of the main performers would go home with 5,000 shillings. You do not know how you're going to do it. You just know the pain and betrayal you feel at that moment is not a thing you wish to spread. One of the longest walks of your life is between the Kenya National Museum courtyard and the inner gate. Staring at 15 of your colleagues, or blissfully unaware that they're about to split those 5 crisp notes. Ushaivunja thou? Hapo Museum Hill, past midnight, Sato, 2012. Before M-Pesa, ama cab, hata boda hazikuwa zimedi wenye ziko tai. Ngori, you'll be happy when Gladys breaks free and joins Sarakasi. You're sure she's set for life. We had no idea what was waiting in 2020 now, did we? Anyway, you learn your lesson. So you'll come alone the next year. And you also learn the importance of contracts. You realize that being a decent human being when running projects matters even more than money. Ensuring all your people are taken care of, especially the vulnerable ones, even the students, it is better than falling over your feet for the stars. Your interns do not have to make ndaos, my guy. And don't starve your volunteers. You occupy Nairobi, including Occupy Westgate. Then Al-Shabaab occupies Westgate for real on show day. Yeah,
so who or what is SNS?
SNS is a group I was part of in campus in Kenyatta University. I was in the School of Visual and Performing Arts in the Department of Theatre Arts and Film. And since we joined in an experimental module, we joined when there was no one else in school. So we did, you remember, did you ever watch those American Pie movies? There's a bunch of films about what it's supposed to be in college in the States. We tried to do that. Then people came in the second semester and were like, guy, people actually chilled out and study.
Yeah.
But somewhere in that, we created a really, really strong bond, and we were learning all these new things together. And we had this wonderful new world awaiting us. We had dreams and all that. And then there were sugar auditions, right? And that was amazing. And we showed up with the entire of Nairobi. And I think almost every single person in my generation of like thespians or actors has a story about the sugar audition, right? I think there's around 20 or 15 of us from my class. None of us got to even be an extra. Like, none of us got a call back, nothing, right? So we went back to school with all that frustration, and everyone was ranting. And like, you know what? We're going to form our own group, and we're going to do things that's so amazing. We'll take over the industry. And so we formed our own group.
Yeah.
We did amazing things. We didn't take over the industry, though. But that was SNS. So, and because we had so many people with so many talents who were just trying to discover themselves at that time, we were doing practically everything, right? And it's the vehicle really that molded me as an artist.
Okay, so how long were you in SNS for? It was the duration you were in KU?
It's in the duration of it was actually shorter than it feels, because we started in 2011. This is very interesting. Now, finally, I mean, a part of my life where I'm like, oh, that's old.
Yeah.
So we started in 2011. I think we were proper functional for 2 or 3 years, and then as people now started specializing and getting opportunities and leaving campus now.
Yeah, it got busy. And would you say that Story Moja, performing at Story Moja, was like one of your biggest achievements as SNS?
I wouldn't speak of SNS. As myself, yes.
Yes.
As the person I was in SNS, that too.
So, what was the process like of preparing for your performance at Story Moja? How was that like financially, emotionally, physically?
What's the most extreme form of stressful? That.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like intertwined with this enthusiasm of, you know, for me it felt like it wasn't a big break, but it was, we'd been trying to do a thing, and I wasn't very familiar with the TV world and the film world and the theater world. I was just starting to figure myself out in the very specific poetry scene, right? And that's where I knew people and things, right? And I knew that at Story Moja is the one place where the most brilliant literary minds that I knew at that time were going to converge, right? So to me, that was the one space that if we needed to get noticed as a young artists, we needed to be at, right? So the opportunity came through, I mentioned Samo and Akil, who I knew them as poets. They also gave me my first job in employment. And Zosi Kadzitu, who would later become like a very integral part of founding Too Early for Birds. And then I think we started rehearsing at KU, because then in KU I'll give them that. I mean, they didn't acknowledge us, but we could rehearse almost anywhere. We could, like, there was just space.
Yeah.
Then we closed school for our first long holidays. And that was very strange. I never not had a plan for 5 months, like up until that point. And because the festival was in September, from August, we started trying to find spaces to rehearse in. We're broke as hell, we're students, it's holidays, we don't even have allowances, like no one has a plot, nothing, right? So we found a place to rehearse at a place called the German Institute. It sounds amazing, but it's Apo Odeon, ukishuka hivi Apo Nairobi River, like you say Kirinyaga Road and that road that goes to Koja. There's a series of very suspicious looking buildings there. Apo Ju. Apo, there's like German Institute of something. I'm not sure the Germans even know that place exists. And then we realized we couldn't raise, it was like 100 or 200 bob for clinic and stuff. So we're like, you guys, Arboretum is free. I don't think it's free anymore.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, but that's why Arboretum needs to stay free. Because we rehearsed for like 2 months, and you just find your fare to Tao, then walk to Arboretum. that's fantastic. That means we don't need warm up. Just
you
go straight into rehearsals. We're also trying to figure out what to do because we're like 15 people with lots of different things.
Yeah.
Then I think at some point, once we found our rhythm, I also mentioned Wanjiku Maora in the letter. She was ahead of us just a bit as a performer. She'd published a book and she was performing in the same thing. So she saw what we were doing. She's like, that's exactly what I need in my piece, right? So we started collaborating and we started learning a lot at that point, right? So there's a lot of shooting in the dark and all that, and then meeting when you go and be like, oh, if that's what she does, then I was kind of okay.
It's same but different.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting because I was also in theatre, and
What?
we used to practice at Arboretum in the beginning before they started charging.
That was you guys! How was that for you?
Theatre was interesting. It was really interesting. I don't think it was a passion of mine, but it was nice. It brought out, I guess, new skills, and it's how it developed into this. So
Yeah. This is a setup.
yeah, theatre is really, it's interesting. It brings out many different angles of someone. So now,
I was about to set you up, and I will. So, do you plan on coming back?
this is my
Just
question
look right
for
there.
you.
Okay.
We are not coming back.
We'll be back.
We're
Watch out for a
not.
link for the part where I ask the questions, and you'll get your answers.
Anyways, okay. So now, what was the agreement with Story Moja?
That we get to perform.
After
right?
you perform?
That wasn't clear. You see,
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? At that point, thinking our careers, even in the scene, really, which is why I mean I can talk about it now, but I'm not holding a grudge. I don't want to do a Twitter that I didn't cause some ruckus. That was the status quo that's in the scene at that point. Like it would be like, yo, there's this fantastic opportunity to perform. You can do all these things. Will you guys do it? Yes, amazing,
Exposure,
right?
we
There's
move on.
exposure, there's platform, and at that point, we
Yeah,
actually
you
needed
need
the
the
exposure
exposure.
and the platform and all that, right? My mistake, which I own because I was the one who made that negotiation, was I didn't know the part where you talk about the money in specific terms and where you sign contracts and all that. So I guess they delivered on what they promised.
Yeah, they gave you the platform.
Right, yeah.
But then now you finished. How many shows did you guys do?
We did, it was one show, one night, but we did 2 different performances, which was not even in the agreement. So the Wanjiku Maora thing was
Wasn't
not in
part
the
of
agreement,
it.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it's weird because it's always the small things. What actually made that a really terrible memory was how cold that night was, right? And we were all in lessons because we were like proper traditional dancers. And I make a joke about my friend Bobby, but his asthma was actually like threatened. He almost didn't perform, I think. And it's one thing to talk of the idea of performance and the entire this hype and Karamadari. How do you pronounce that thing? I should not have even gotten myself into that situation. But that thing, there's that idea, right? And then there's when you're actually performing and you're seeing your friends, this is work and like there's sacrifice and all that.
Yeah.
And at that point, in my ignorance, I assumed it naturally pays off, right?
And rightfully so. But then here you are, you've performed in the cold, Bobby is nearly dying, you are 15 people, you've been given 5,000 Kenyan shillings.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like you to paint me a picture and describe, first of all, how much were you expecting at least? And second of all, how did you go to explain to the rest that, you know what, for all our hard work, for our rehearsals, this is the 5,000 bob we have to divide against 15 people.
What was the first part?
How much were you expecting?
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
Right? I was so ignorant.
It was not 5,000.
It was not 5,000, right? At the very least, right? 1,000 bob would have changed our lives.
Yeah.
At that point, right? It would have. And I would say, like, if I put myself in that situation, then of course I've learned so much. Like, I would say, like, at least 15K would have sent everyone home. Not happy,
Yeah.
but
At least.
seeing the value in the exposure and the platform, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have a fixed amount in mind, but I just thought the same way these guys didn't give us a very specific brief, they just expected us to deliver something that would satisfy them. I thought that on the side also they would deliver something that would satisfy us, right? But it's one of those hard learning lessons, because then the next year, the part I mentioned, Westgate, we had a contract for that.
Yeah, that you get smarter after a while. But how did you break it to your other friends that this is what we have?
I think that's a suppressed memory. That's like, I don't remember. I think I've pulled off a handful. Actually, I'll give myself that, a handful of miracles. That might not be the first one. But I think at that point, it might not have been as difficult to break it to them as it is now. I think I went with the angle of, at least here to come to the tickets. Because at that point, there was also the part where you'd get a gig and also get a bunch of tickets, right? And your payment is coming in commission. Those lessons will not prevent you from following Samo, Akil, and Zosi into advertising. For the character development was 3 lifetimes, which has shaped a lot of who I am as I type this letter out to you, both the shine and the shit. Always thank Alea Kasam for the season you're in right now, Ngatia. She's the producer of the Story Moja Festival you're discovering. All red and stressed. Still, she brought the idea of the star up to life and handed it to Akil and Samo. The rightfully eclectic result is a better introduction to the scene than you had hoped for. It introduces you to the financial, artsy, social, romantic, and shady angles of this life that chooses us. That is how you meet a lot of people for the first time. Alea, Njora, Maitha, Owa, Magunga, Shikungure, Anmora, Ndinda, Ngunu, Faith, Kibali, Yanarunga, Wangari the storyteller. Juliet Maruru's ideagasms shape an entire generation of creators, I dare say. For sure, they kickstart the domino effect of ideas that result in Too Early for Birds. Juliet, with her biscuits, tea, cake, excellent stories, excellent taste in stories too, her quiet command and gentle prodding. Absence is a strange concept. Juliet isn't here as I type this. I still find myself wanting to forward puppy names. Juliet is how I met a book club called Sana. Actually, almost everyone who later becomes part of Too Early for Birds, I get to know at that festival. Here's a strange thing. The people you're in SNS with are your closest friends. Some 10 years later, you are trying to re-establish some of those friendships. 10 years later, some of the people you're meeting at that festival are my closest friends and collaborators. But then through some of the work you will all do, which is some of the best work I think I've been part of, you will also lose most of the friendships you think are forever. Never thought I'd tell you this, but I don't even know what kind of family some are raising. And they don't know what I'm doing with my life or not doing with my life. Right, so it's a weird domino effect. Also, thank Kadinzisa. Around this time, you are looking for a footing in the spoken word scene, trying to understand it. You've attended all the free gigs. Now you're hoping to make it into Wamadhai's spoken word. It is expensive as hell. Show day, call from Kadi. You've been talking on Twitter. It is all the 357 people on the timeline at that time, and they all say good morning to each other every day, like a big school assembly. It's weird. Kadi is one of the 9 people reading your blog spot. She calls asking where you are. Home, you say. A lie. You're at Kaimuri's in Parklands. Skunking! You're not going for the gig? I'm too tired. Another lie. You're too broke. But I got a ticket for you. What? Utakam? She shouldn't have. We kuja. Sawa basi. I gotta drag myself out of bed. You're technically Pinocchio at this point. Running out. You'll get to the gig, you'll kick it. It's breezy, wonderful, nice times. Jemedari is the MC. Kadhi knows him from Nakuru. They are basically fam. She's read your stuff. So she's trying to convince him that this skinny, Timau-looking, Mitongo-speaking, Raikimbo feeling fellow has something to say. The answer is no. A simple, inelegant no. You'll feel worse for Kadhi than for yourself. You'll later learn how much it sucks that Wamadha is spoken word for new performers. In a couple of later events, you'll almost beg for a chance to perform after you've paid and get a very kind explanation from the professionals. You don't just walk into a gig and ask to perform and say, okay, there are people on the poster. These things take time, patience, and order, rehearsals. Try next time. Oh, you bought a ticket. Oh, how wonderful. Thank you. Tweet me. We'll talk about performing next time. Then you'd get to watch an occasional tweet pic, wife rog of 5-star worthy motherfucker walk in, no name on poster, and get the mic. And that's how you never get to perform at Wamadai, my guy. Not on this day. But you should really thank Kadhi for buying you your first ticket into a world you'd only seen through Twitter and newspapers.
Yeah, so who or what is SNS?
SNS is a group I was part of in campus in Kenyatta University. I was in the School of Visual and Performing Arts in the Department of Theatre Arts and Film. And since we joined in an experimental module, we joined when there was no one else in school. So we did, did you ever watch those American Pie movies? There's a bunch of films about what it's supposed to be in college in the States. We tried to do that. Then people came in the second semester and were like, guy, people actually chilled out and study.
Yeah.
But somewhere in that, we created a really, really strong bond, and we were learning all these new things together. And we had this wonderful new world awaiting us. We had dreams and all that. And then there were sugar auditions, right? And that was amazing. And we showed up with the entire of Nairobi. And I think almost every single person in my generation of like thespians or actors has a story about the sugar audition, right? I think there's around 20 or 15 of us from my class. None of us got to even be an extra. Like, none of us got a call back, nothing, right? So we went back to school with all that frustration, and everyone was ranting, and we were like, you know what? We're going to form our own group, and we're going to do things that's so amazing. We'll take over the industry. And so we formed our own group.
Yeah.
We did amazing things. We didn't take over the industry, though. But that was SNS. So, and because we had so many people with so many talents who were just trying to discover themselves at that time, we were doing practically everything, right? And it's the vehicle really that molded me as an artist.
Okay, so how long were you in SNS? What was the duration you were in KU?
It's in the duration of it was actually shorter than it feels, because we started in 2011. This is very interesting. Now, finally, I mean, a part of my life where I'm like, oh, that's old.
Yeah.
So we started in 2011. I think we were proper functional for 2 or 3 years, and then as people now started specializing and getting opportunities and leaving campus now.
Yeah, it got busy. And would you say that Story Moja, performing at Story Moja, was like one of your biggest achievements as SNS?
I wouldn't speak of SNS. As myself, yes.
Yes.
As the person I was in SNS, that too.
So, what was the process like of preparing for your performance at Story Moja? How was that like financially, emotionally, physically? What's
the most extreme form of stressful? That
yeah,
but like intertwined with this enthusiasm of you know, for me, it felt like it wasn't a big break, but it was, we'd been trying to do a thing. And I wasn't very familiar with the TV world and the film world and the theater world. I was just starting to figure myself out in the very specific poetry scene, right? And that's where I knew people and things, right? And I knew that at Story Moja is the one place where the most brilliant literary minds that I knew at that time were going to converge, right? So to me, that was the one space that if we needed to get noticed as a young artists, we needed to be at, right? So the opportunity came through, I mentioned Samo and Akil, who I knew them as poets. They also gave me my first job in employment. And Zosi Kadzitu, who would later become like a very integral part of founding Too Early for Birds. And then I think we started rehearsing at KU. Because then in KU, I'll give them that. I mean, they didn't acknowledge us, but we could rehearse almost anywhere. We could, like, there was just space. Then we closed school for our first long holidays. And that was very strange. I never not had a plan for 5 months, like, up until that point. And because the festival was in September, from August, we started trying to find spaces to rehearse in. We're broke as hell, we're students, it's holidays, we don't even have allowances, like no one has a plot, nothing, right? So we found a place to rehearse at a place called the German Institute. It sounds amazing, but it's Apo Odeon, ukishuka hivi, Apo Nairobi River, like you can see Kirinyaga Road and that road that goes to Koja. There's a series of very suspicious looking buildings there, Apo Ju. Apo, there's like German Institute of something. I'm not sure the Germans even know that that place exists. And then we realized we couldn't raise, it was like 100 or 200 bob for clinic and stuff. So we're like, you guys, Arboretum is free. I don't think it's free anymore.
It's not.
But that's why Arboretum needs to stay free. Because we rehearsed for like 2 months and you just find your fare to Tao, then walk to Arboretum. That's fantastic. That means we don't need warm-up. Just go straight into rehearsals. We're also trying to figure out what to do because we're like 15 people with lots of different things. Then I think at some point once we found our rhythm, I also mentioned Wanjiku Maora in the letter. She was ahead of us just a bit as a performer. She'd published a book and she was performing in the same thing. So she saw what we were doing and she was like, that's exactly what I need in my piece, right? So we started collaborating and we started learning a lot at that point, right? So there's a lot of shooting in the dark and all that, and then meeting when you go and be like, oh, if that's what she does, then I was kind of okay.
It's same but different. It's actually interesting because I was also in theater, and
What?
we used to practice at Arboretum in the beginning before they started charging.
That was you guys! How was that for you?
Theater was interesting. It was really interesting. I don't think it was a passion of mine, but it was nice. It brought out, I guess, new skills, and it's how it developed into this. So
this is a setup.
Theater is really, it's interesting. It brings out many different angles of someone. So now,
I was about to set you up, and I will. So, do you plan on coming back?
This is my
Just
question
right
for
there.
you.
Okay.
We are not coming back.
We'll be back. Watch out for a
not.
link for the part where I ask the questions, and you'll get your answers.
Anyways, okay. So now, what was the agreement with Story Moja?
That we get to perform.
After
right?
you perform?
That wasn't clear. You see, that's the thing, right? At that point, thinking our careers, even in the scene, really, which is why, I mean, I can talk about it now, but I'm not holding a grudge. I don't want to do a Twitter that I didn't cause some ruckus. That was the status quo that's in the scene at that point. Like, it would be like, yo, there's this fantastic opportunity to perform, you can do all these things. Will you guys do it? Yes, amazing,
Exposure,
right?
There's
exposure, there's platform, and at that point, we actually
you
needed the exposure and the platform and all that, right? My mistake, which I own because I was the one who made that negotiation, was I didn't know the part where you talk about the money in specific terms and where you sign contracts and all that. So I guess they delivered on what they promised.
Yeah, they gave you the platform.
Right, yeah.
But then now you finished. How many shows did you guys do?
We did, it was one show, one night, but we did 2 different performances, which was not even in the agreement. So the Wanjiku Maura thing was not in the agreement, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's weird because it's always the small things. What actually made that a terrible memory was how cold that night was, right? And we were all in lessons because we were like proper traditional dancers. And I make a joke about my friend Bobby, but his asthma was actually like threatened. He almost didn't perform, I think. And it's one thing to talk of the idea of performance and the entire this hype and camaraderie. How do you pronounce that thing? I should not have even gotten myself into that situation. But that thing, there's that idea, right? And then there's when you're actually performing and you're seeing your friends, this is work and like there's sacrifice and all that.
Yeah.
And at that point, in my ignorance, I assumed it naturally pays off, right?
And rightfully so. But then here you are, you've performed in the cold, Bobby is nearly dying, you are 15 people, you've been given 5,000 Kenyan shillings.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like you to paint me a picture and describe, first of all, how much were you expecting at least? And second of all, how did you go to explain to the rest that, you know what, for all our hard work, for our rehearsals, this is the 5,000 bob we have to divide against 15 people.
What was the first part?
How much were you expecting?
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
Right? I was so ignorant.
It was not 5,000.
It was not 5,000, right? At the very least, right? 1,000 bob would have changed our lives.
Yeah.
At that point, right? It would have. And I would say, like, if I put myself in that situation, then of course I've learned so much. Like, I would say, like, at least 15K would have sent everyone home. Not happy,
yeah,
but
at least
seeing the value in the exposure and the platform, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have a fixed amount in mind, but I just thought the same way these guys didn't give us a very specific brief, they just expected us to deliver something that would satisfy them. I thought that on the side also they would deliver something that would satisfy us, right? But it's one of those hard learning lessons, because then the next year, the part I mentioned, Westgate, we had a contract for that.
Yeah, that you get smarter after a while. But how did you break it to your other friends that this is what we have?
I think that's a suppressed memory. That's like, I don't remember. I think I've pulled off a handful, actually. I'll give myself that, a handful of miracles. That might not be the first one. But I think at that point, it might not have been as difficult to break it to them as it is now. I think I went with the angle of, at least here to come to the tickets. Because at that point, there was also the part where you'd get a gig and also get a bunch of tickets, right? And your payment is coming in commission. But you should really thank Kathy for buying you your first ticket into a world you'd only seen through Twitter and newspapers. I wish someone had told me earlier that there is no magic in Ngatia. It's just work. Number 2, be kind. Really. To everyone. Number 3, it's not the papers or the grades, the school, the looks, the fashion sense, the privilege, the accent, the exposure, the fame, the talent, the skills, the influence, the access, the support, the love, the followers, the power, the money. It's what one can do with it. The end. Last one. Your friends, those are the ones you sign your first contracts with, and the strictest ones. Once you embark on an endeavor together, it will protect you, your friendship, and the work. Once you start the work, give it 100%, no more. That 100 is enough, trust me. And you're not insane. You're going to lose your mind, for sure, but you're not insane. And it will not all be in vain. And you're still rhyming in random sentences, so you're still a spoken word nigger. P.S. Don't mind the suicidal thoughts. You won't pull it off. Not in 2019, not in 2020. It's taken a couple of long, exhausting years to get here, but right now, there's nothing I'd rather be than alive. Listen to Frank Ocean, kid. Godspeed.
Okay, so now let's talk a bit about Too Early for Birds, yeah?
Oh God, yeah.
Why oh God? But then
it's the thing everyone wants to talk about.
yeah.
Can we talk about my inner beauty? Like my personality? Okay. Shit.
For those who might not know, what is Too Early for Birds?
Too Early for Birds is a storytelling initiative. Started as a series of theater productions. And the idea is to revisit and retell Kenyan history in a perspective that doesn't sound like your double history in high school after lunch, right? So in 2017, Abu Bakar Majid and I were working at Scanad, and we were trying to leave. And we'd been performing for a while, so we were coming up with different ideas of something we could do that, one, just gives us direction as artists and gives us a break from corporate. And we had a TV show that was based on stories that our friend Owa was doing on his blog. So we do a pilot, we pitch it to a bunch of media houses. No one knew us. They're like, this is really nice. Oh my God, you young people are doing such nice things. Kenyans are not going to get it by. Yeah, that was different versions of the same thing.
That didn't go how I was expecting.
No, that's exactly, like, the argument was not like our work is bad. It was like Kenyans are not smart enough for it. I was like, which Kenyans, man? Like, they're following Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad and all these soap operas that even I can't follow. Like, I'm like, this is a lot. So we didn't have the resources. Film is expensive. Even this is expensive. But what we had at that point was a bit of stage experience. So we were like, come on, Kenya ni wajinga, I guess, eke tu kwa room, and then we put this thing here, and we see them not getting it, right? Which didn't happen. So we started a bunch of stories that we were interested in at that time, and then slowly developed into a process. People really showed up for us, like for the first one, it was 17th of May 2017. That's 5 years ago. And then they demanded another one, right? And I remember the common sentiment was like, we showed up for the first one because you guys, like, we don't understand why you quit your jobs, but we don't want you to stop, but we'll come to the second one for the stories. So we're still doing that for the stories. So far we've done 5 editions. Do like a short list of stories to end this answer. With like stories from Polngei, Nyayo House, Wangare Matai, Tomboya, that was the biggest one. We did, I think the most interesting one for most people was Brazen, which was everything by women. So it was stories of...
I think I remember that one.
Yeah. So stories of Kenyan women, told, researched, written, and told by women. And we have another one coming.
When is it?
Yeah, the announcement is dropping today, so I guess I can tell you the dates.
I'm not sure this can have dropped by the time I'll have missed it.
No, exactly, because if it dropped after we've announced, then there's no harm, right? As I'm right, you took on a contract and Wambaira was there when I was making the decision. It's on the... I could tell you, or I could show you the posters that haven't been posted yet. What do you want?
We could just share the posters on the video, I guess.
It's in the first weekend of November.
First weekend of November.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I think, it will make it to the show. So you guys can go and watch Too Early for Birds.
I need to start this. It's been 5 years, but what hatujapata equipment.
Okay, so what accomplishment do you have with Too Early for Birds that makes you feel so proud of it?
Whoa, okay. Damn. I'll say two things. Number one, that we actually did the thing. Right? Like, it's been a constant. There's a part at the end of the letter where I'm kind of reassuring younger me that we're not crazy.
Yeah.
The 24 Birds journey has been a lot of crazy ideas and crazy propositions and a bunch of crazy people coming together to do a crazy thing. Like, the first one, there was a caveat on the phone call as people were getting is like, it's either going to really work or it's going to fail spectacularly. And everyone who was part of the first cast and crew knew that. And it's done this strange thing where it surprises us every single time, yet we haven't had a time where we've done it to what our actual 100% vision was, right? So the fact that we even do it and continue to do it, that for me is a very proud point. The second one is that people owned it, not just the audience, even the cast and the crew. And it's always very strange to speak of 24 Birds as mine or Boo's or Stories Etu's. But the best consequence of that, which I'm proud of, is that it's become a sort of springboard where we're currently not the biggest thing in the country. However, I've seen so many people, including myself, get on this 24 Birds stage and then proceed to do more interesting things or things at a bigger scale, right? So with TV and arts and music.
Acted as a stepping stone.
Yes, that, it was very confusing at the beginning because you do a show and then you go back and you be like, sasa mna shoot movie. Okay, I guess, okay, do we have another friend who needs, okay. But now it's like, oh, goddamn, like we created this thing that, and continuously, every time we do a show, people do more interesting things. That's actually the one I'm most proud of.
Okay, that's really nice. You mentioned a bit about your friends and how you may not really have the friends who are, you know, like 25 years ago, but wako bado. And you talked a lot about your SNS friends being a lot like family, but then you grew apart from them a bit, and then now you're to Ali for Birds friends are the ones who became more like family, but now you're sort of trying to reconnect with the SNS like fam again. So how is that, and how, like, where does that leave to Ali for Birds now?
I think I'd start by just calling those phases. Because I think in the letter I was speaking of not just the friends I had in SNS, but the friends I had in that season. I won't call it terrible, but I have a chaotic relationship with time and how I remember time. So I lump them together like that, right? And then I guess number two, that also shows how terrible I am with boundaries, especially with work and personal relationships. However, what I'm learning now is that, I mean, life in general it's cycles, it's same things coming back in different ways, and friendships and relationships work in similar ways. So my SNS friends and the people I met in campus and the first friends I made in Nairobi and in the spoken word scene, because all those things happened simultaneously. I moved from Mitongo just as I was about to join campus. So that also might be a reason for my terrible boundaries. So what I realized at that time is those are the friends I was making for myself, not just because of the situation I was in. Like, in boarding school, you have no other options.
Yeah, only those people there.
It's only those people, right? In KU, even when it was an institution and it was just the first years in school, it was still like 10,000 or 15,000, right? We still have lots of choices. My first semester friends were like all teachers now, and like before now I met those. So when we left school, because there are those who graduated, some who dropped out and all that, and people started their lives, then I got into another phase of my life where I was making adult friends outside of a school situation, right? And some are friends I'd been making all along, so Kinabu, who I'd met in spoken word and all that, and some I was meeting through work and other parts of my life, right? And those are mostly the friends who've carried me over through my, I'd say, early and mid-20s. I would say that phase kind of starts to get strange at the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because everything came to a standstill. And then I started learning that a lot of my friendships were based on foundations that were either me working or us meeting outside or us doing something that actively requires social interaction or being outside the house, right? So a lot of those started drifting away just because everyone was focusing on surviving, right?
Yeah.
But then there was also a struggle I was going through there mentally, and it also involved me trying to get back to my older passions and things I was interested in growing up and all that, which led me right back to where I was when I joined campus. And it seems that those friends are also like having their close circle moments where now some are coming back, they have families, they have kids, people have careers. There are those who I'm meeting now in professional spaces because we're peers.
Yeah.
So no matter how far, as long as we're in this country, in Nairobi, ni dot. Well, so that's,
Mnapatana.
yeah. I don't have a clear answer for that. That's the best I can do.
No, that actually suffices.
Okay.
So apart from theater, you are into spoken word, and also at some point you did advertising.
Yeah.
How has your journey as a spoken word artist been like?
That's my true journey, actually. I like calling it spoken word is strange because it's for me it's just poetry, and it's the first thing I remember writing for myself, and not for schoolwork, nothing. It's just and it wasn't even English poetry. I started with ushairi, which most people don't know. Like I had my Vinas and Vibetis tight before I wrote my first English rhyme. But it's been the constant thing I go back to. I switched into like from just poetry into the spoken word scene because I needed an audience.
Yeah.
So I realized, you know, I had the blog spot that I was talking about with all the 9 readers, and there are all these gigs all over the place with hundreds of people, right? So the easiest way to get people to consume your work, if you don't, actually even a camera didn't really help at that time, it's 2011, like YouTube needs 2 bob at a cyber cafe, right? So I started performing, and then I made friends in that scene who've really informed, guided, sharpened me, mostly as an artist, but also as a person, because we got into the scene at the same time with Teardrops, Jichopevu, Mufasa came like a couple of years later. Actually, when we were doing the Occupy Nairobi thing, I remember Mufasa trying to do his first gigs. But the most interesting thing for me is the musicians who come through the spoken word scene, because the time we were down bad, we couldn't afford a theater or a space, so we were doing street poetry at Aga Khan Walk on Sundays, like last Sundays of the month. Just show up, kick the what's the name? Kick out the preachers and just do poetry. Right? Hat the Band wasn't even Hat the Band then. I think we used to call them Waluya Soccer Band or something. Fee, Sarabi, like a bunch of, but it's that's where I learned, I don't want to use the word fortitude, but when you have a very small, loyal, recurring audience that doesn't care where you're performing, they just want to get the work, you realize that it's about the work. It's not about the number of views you get or listens and all that. It's about the work and the people who are relating to it, right? And it also has put me through some very painful lessons that I now really appreciate. I mention the musicians because the interesting thing with them is they come and they take off.
Yeah.
Right? So you're doing rhymes with guys on the streets, and then you hear them in the mat on the radio, and then you're seeing them, and you and your other spoken word guys are not moving, or you've just made like 2 steps.
Yeah.
And then another generation of musicians does the same thing, and then another 2 steps. And so the first time it's like, whoa, that's amazing. You hear Uliza Kiatu in the, you almost stop the match. The second time you're like, okay, goddamn, man. I mean, that's dope. But that time you're like, Nasisi, right? The fourth time you're like, okay, I guess. You just keep moving.
Yeah, but then now also speaking about pain, you talked a bit about the Wamaida spoken word, yeah?
I thank you for doing that, because like that's a constant thing that happens in his life. So
Yeah.
he's constantly tweeting about how people call him Wamaida instead of Wamadai.
Oh, she's Wamadai.
Yeah.
The Wamadai spoken word. So you say that it was a bit hard for new performance, for new performers there. Why was it hard for like new performers?
Because we didn't know people. It's easy as that, right? And it wasn't just Wamadai. I think I singled it out because for the specific moment I was writing about in the letter, it was the same case. We'd buy tickets at Kwani open mic and still beg for a spot to perform. I mean, at least with Kwani, Cindy Ogana was an amazing person. Like, you wouldn't get a chance, but you wouldn't go home feeling horrible. Like, and you'd come the next time and Cindy would remember your name. You see, that means a lot to someone who's starting out,
Yeah.
right? The first time I went to perform at Slam Africa, I'd actually not gone to perform. I was going to do research because I'd been told, just go watch people performing before you start doing the thing. I got there and we learned there was a gate price. We didn't know they were selling tickets. So my friend Tony and I like changed our money and realized we could only afford one ticket and fare back home, right? So security guy who was really nice was like, okay, mmoja wenu akiperform, wanakubaliange watu wanaperform ingie free. So that's how I got into, like, I performed for the first time because the only way they were allowing people into the venue without paying for tickets was if you perform, right? But Slam is a competition.
Yeah.
So you're not getting at your nice chance to showcase your art. No, you have like 15 other really, really hungry people coming after you. So it was an entire culture at that time where it felt like if you didn't have, if you're not your older brother or a friend or someone who had some kind of connect, which is weird because it's not like there was a shitload of money in this spoken word scene, right? But then a few years later, I came to another realization, right? Which is, because at that time we'd get like really, really mad. You know, you'd trek, we were mostly trekking, you'd trek all the way to your mat. You're just talking about these cliques, nini, oh, you don't, like, you have to come from La Vie to get these opportunities, you have to write in English, because we were performing mostly in Sheng. Then a few years later, I realized those cliques don't happen accidentally or maliciously. People come in and face probably the same exact problems we faced or worse, right? And so they did what we naturally did, because as SNS and also as that crew of like spoken word artists, and we just banded together, right? And that's how we ended up in the streets. That's how we ended up doing our own shows and all that. And we ended up growing that way, right? And because of the pain we'd felt in that, at least I try to make sure the projects I'm in don't have the same. And I hope the other people we experience the same, the thing we do the same. Yeah.
And I remember even in the same, she said it was Wamaida.
Wamadai.
Wamadai.
I'm loving it, by the way. Like,
Wamadai spoken word. For you, you'd come in and you'd ask to perform, and you're like, no, there's a list of people, and you just can't show up and perform.
Yeah.
But you're like, there's still people who would show up and be allowed to perform.
Yeah.
So according to you, who are these people who are being allowed to perform? Was it against still people who had connections? Or why were they being allowed to perform?
Number one, they were really good. I'll give them that. Like, it's probably like a couple of instances I was like, really? But in most times, you'll be like, oh, god damn, I see why they got the mic, right? But still, it's like, I got a poster, come on, right? And number two, mostly because of influence, right? Which again, now I understand running a show also as a business, right? Of course, it matters what the person on stage is saying and if their content is good. But unfortunately, it also matters who they are, right? Could get a random person from the street to come and read a poem, right? And be like, yeah, nice poem. Or you could come and read the poem, and now it becomes about something else because you come with more, you come with an audience, you come with that, right? there are people there who won't even appreciate the poem, they just appreciate the fact that it's you doing the poem, right? So I would understand that later, and also no one had the time to explain it, but I get it. If you're trying to sell tickets, right, and you're trying to break even, and some random person who's really influential walks in and be like, "Neza pata mic, gwambia shika, actually niko na tickets 20 za kuuza."
So it's nothing personal, it's just business.
Yeah.
Sometimes at the end of the day.
On one side, right? For the person starting out though, it's very personal, right? Which is why then we can't keep going with that excuse, right? It's like, yeah, it's business, but also think about
the other person.
Yeah.
So now, when it comes to advertising, you say it has a lot of character. First of all, how did you even get into the advertising?
So that's the same story, moja thing. So the next year we were planning, Occupy Nairobi was the name of the show. So we spent a lot of time in restaurants and taking cabs. And at some point, because Samo, Akil, the people I mentioned were also not doing that as their full-time thing. They had main jobs, right? I remember at that time, Akil and Abu were working, I think it's Cube, we were working, but let me not say that for sure, but they were working at an advertising agency. And they had a really interesting brand. It was one of the biscuit brands, and they were doing a comic of it that was being posted online. It's 10 years ago. Like, people doing work for brands and getting paid for. But I remember asking Akil, "You get paid to tweet?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You're kidding." Like, he's like, "Of course, it's planning around it and all that, but essentially, yes, I do get paid to tweet." And I was like, "How do I get it?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'll call you if there's an opportunity." Then he calls me the next year and he's like, "So, Samuel and I are starting an agency. Would you like?"
Yeah.
Like, "Yeah, of course." Like, "Yeah, man, but you need to come with your laptop." Like, "Yeah, I got stolen last week." So it took a few months to join.
Yeah.
But then I joined the agency, worked there for a year. I left to finish my degree and to start. I was doing an experimental theater show at that point.
At that time.
And then I needed to move out and I was broke, and Scanad came calling, so I joined Scanad.
And what was the character development that you mentioned that came with advertising?
I also didn't sign a contract at the first job. So I'd learned with the gigs, but now with employment, that was totally different, right? And again, being employed by your friends is also like another totally different thing that no one had prepared me for.
Kuna kuzoeana.
Kuna kuzoeana, right? Na mimi uzoeana na watu mbaya. And then there is the number of just deep ends kwa pool. Like unamkanga tu daily unarusha kwa ule mtoto wa mbachi. Like it's just a different pool every day.
Fight for your life.
Yeah, I remember we actually went in, it was like, yeah, it's dope, we'll do the agency work, but my main purpose was to redo the show we didn't do when Al-Shabaab interrupted, right? So we were going to do it the next year, but we needed to raise money for that, so we were doing the agency work. My first brief was the rebranding of Maisha Magic into Maisha Magic Swahili. Like, bro, I'm 20, I'm not even 20, I was 19. I'm halfway through my degree. What am I supposed to do with this? And then it was that every single day after that, right? And by the time I was joining Scanad, I was like, yeah, I kind of know what this is. And then I go and I realize the budgets are like 10 times bigger and like, so there's that side. And then there's the other side where my advertising work drove me into depression. Like, constantly and continuously, like up to the point where I was leaving, I had to leave to stay alive, right? That's a long character development journey I would get into right now. But even the quintessential stereotypical Nairobi character development, hapo ndo unajua wasichana in Nairobi ni hey. But also now I really learned now professionally, now the contract thing, the negotiation thing, now doing proposals, nini. But all this stuff, because no one gives you like a 3-month preparation course. It's constant failures and disappointments. that's what I meant. It's a lot. Don't open that Pandora.
Okay, but then also, while you are winding up your letter, you mentioned that there's periods where you felt as if you were going mad, you were going insane.
Yeah, there's a short phrase for that period. It's called "All My Life." but there's very specific ones.
How exactly does that feel like?
It doesn't feel like it, actually. That's the weird thing. I had a mental breakdown in May of 2020. And apart from the anxiety attacks, which I was used to at that point, I shouldn't even, no one should get to a point where they say that, but I was. And the suicidal thoughts, which had been very, very constant by that point. Apart from those, I would have told you everything else was working amazing, even halfway through the thing, right? And then it kept going for months, and I knew something was wrong, so I was trying to fix it, took a break, like a lot of things. When I blue ticked Barack for months. So I was trying to do everything. At that point, I'd kind of gotten a cycle. I'd be like, I have these really low moments, so this is what I do. Like, I stop working, I start like reading a lot, I go back home, so I started doing what I do, and then it wasn't working. And then something else would happen, and I'd go back, I'd be worse, right? So it starts with not feeling like you're losing your mind, and then it becomes, for me, doubting your reality, right? So, including my entire life, right? Because I'd wake up and have a very simple task. It's like, today I'm sending this email. It's not, there's nothing, it's just a reply, right? And I spend my entire day trying to get myself to send the email, and in the evening I can't, and I wake up the next day with either that or another simple task that I just can't pull my mind. I don't have enough language for it, but what that does is it makes you start going back to things you've accomplished in your life and being like, if I can't send an email, did I really do that thing?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and or have I just been gassing myself up my entire life, right? And then I guess the worst point was when like I finally admitted to myself I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't live alone. I couldn't trust myself to take care of myself, which was growing up, the kind of upbringing I had. I always had to be sure I can take care of myself, even when now I look back, I was like, you were 5, you were not going to take care of it. Like, I was still like, no. And then I was 25, 26, the world was ending, and I didn't know how to take care of myself.
Yeah.
That was fucked up. And then after that, that is the worst part. It's like a combination of two things. So there's a point where I'd gotten to the point where I was gonna end my life, and then I'd gotten past it, right? And people talk about suicidal thoughts, and people talk about suicidal ideation, and people talk about suicide. But there isn't enough talk, or at least I haven't found enough material on when you decide not to take your life, but you still have nothing to live for, right? And you're just there. Like, you really don't want to be there, but you're just there, right? So it's that, which was intertwined now because I'd admitted and I was trying to get help with now people trying to take care of me, right? So that manifests in two ways. There are people who are really good at it, and there are people who overdo it. And you end up feeling like a victim or a patient, which is now what I've gotten used to, or which is now, if I was really to answer your question with one sentence, or feeling like the entire thing is curated for you. right? Like akandika like kachizi ketu ndio wenye kanaamini that like no one break the nini. It's kind of like an entire, what's that movie? It's two. It's the Truman Show and Shutter Island. It's the same idea of just a life curated around someone. That I would say is what for me it feels like. I guess I wouldn't say insane, but to lose your mind in the level that I have.
Yeah.
By the worst, this is no part of your question, but I'll just answer. The worst part about that entire thing, I think for me, is at some point I was misdiagnosed. So I had a period there when I was taking schizophrenia meds instead of ADHD meds, and I'm still trying to figure out how to put into words what that felt like.
Yeah.
Have I answered your question? This is a
No,
very
you
uncomfortable.
actually, you actually really have. And I'm just wondering what happened between 2019 and 2020 that might have fueled it. Was it just the COVID and maybe being isolated?
No, it was a bunch of stuff. We did the Mboya edition of Too Early for Birds in October of 2019, and then we went back off stage in November. The time we went back on stage, I was supposed to be resting because I'd been working continuously on that production for 8 months at that point. And then before that, in 2018, we'd done a bunch of shows. One of them was in Nanyuki, where we made a substantial loss, right? So Abu and I spent a majority of the remainder of 2018, including the time Brazen was running, raising money to pay debts for that show. That show in Nanyuki had happened because we were so confident in ourselves because of how well our shows had done to that point. And that's because we'd been working continuously since we'd quit our jobs to start the show. And before we quit, we'd been working continuously. Like it's been just years and years and years of work. And then when I'd really scheduled break time, it like, you know, a thespian's dream is going back on stage on actual public demand, like it's not PR. And that happened. And I was sending out emails on the beach being like, guys, for real, but I'm not 20 and so came back, and then that meant we had to start the next show. Like work was a big part of it. Also, I didn't know at that time, but I coped by working. So now I have to take intentional breaks, which is more work than I thought it would ever be. Number two, I was doing too much, not just like work-wise, but my social circles, the kinds of collaborations we were doing, not because of work, but to build relationships. I was part of the NBO Musical Theatre Initiative, which is this amazing project that's been running for a few years. But it makes you relearn the entire theater thing. Like now you're writing musicals, right? So there's a time we were doing that and writing Too Early for Birds and writing Sooner Johnny, which is on Showmax, and was directing and performing in Ngugi wa Thiong'o story that we were doing in 12 languages, and we were doing a play called Written on the Body at Alliance, and we were shooting Tetu Shani's video.
So
in the same way.
There was a lot going on every single day.
Yes, so there was that. There was a lot happening in my love life as well that I can't talk about. And my family life has always been dramatic. So those were the main ones. But Nairobi, Pia.
Yeah.
Guy, like Nairobi is the overarching one. It's just...
I can check it too because
please,
I relate.
Like if my therapist opens the notebooks one day, like itakuwa tu Nairobi.
And how did you manage to get out of it? Like how do you get to a point where like, you know what, I love life, because that's something you also mentioned in the letter, and I want to be here, I want to be present.
Yeah. I think I got to a point where like I couldn't dig anymore. Like we ever hit rock bottom and like this is a nice time to figure out how they do boreholes. That's where I was. And I'm very stubborn. And remember like friends, there's the time my friend Shiba just kept telling me, just can you stop working? Right? And then I was realizing I don't know how to do it, right? Because I'm like, yeah, I'm not working. It's like, no, you just pitched an entire day. I'm like, but we're not working on it. It's the thing for the future. It's like, that's work. I was like, so I had to try everything I knew, and then for none of it to work. To realize that I'm more than the things that represent me. That being my work, my social media, my career, my other, like the person I was in my socials compound, that person deserves everything I think the person I am when I have a sold out show deserves.
Yeah.
But that took way longer than it should. Like learning, like at my worst, I deserve the same love I give myself at my best. That's like, it's such a simple lesson, but it took way too much time and too many battles to learn.
Yeah.
But to get there, the show sank, which was the most proud achievement of my life. A lot of relationships ended in my life that I thought were going to be life relationships, like friendships and partnerships, and even family members that people I haven't spoken to since then. And then at some point I was homeless because I couldn't make money. Right? I needed my mind to make money, and my mind just wasn't showing up. So I failed on everything that I was scared of failing at. Like for the longest time, I grew up in poverty. I come from poverty. For the longest time, my greatest fear was going back to poverty, and then I woke up one day, I was like, I guess I am actually poor. Like as myself. Sisi na familia yetu. Yani mimi kama mimi ni maskini wa Mungu leo. But then at that point, and the point, if like I looked around, and not only were there so many people who like were not giving up on me, like giving up was not even in like one of their options, right? And it turned out like I'm the one who was viewing our relationships as based on I have to do this as a friend, or I have to be like this as a person for this to be availed, right? I mean, that was also present. Like a lot of the relationships I lost were also because they're only functional if I was functional. But it's me and finding, I don't want to say my center, but finding the person I am when I'm not wearing any masks. Is that kid who was raised on Mugithi music and herding cattle while reading novels at the same time, and like all that. But it's still an ongoing process. I wake up every day and it's weird. This entire year has been a gamble.
Yeah. Just more like a journey.
Yes, but I think this is the one. I'm sorry, I suck at like short answers. But the one thing that I have constantly have had to learn like the hard way is just to cut myself slack.
Yeah.
Like that, just like giving myself grace. So that's your one line
the
answer.
Short answer would
is
be
grace.
That's it.
It's grace.
Yeah. And how you wind up your letter, you talked a bit about the lessons that you have learned like throughout. And lesson number 1 was kindness. And in this lesson, you it reminds me, like it takes me back to the part of your letter where you were like, you know what, one day when I have my own show and there's this many people, I have to make sure everyone is fairly compensated. Have you been able to achieve this?
I've done my best.
Yeah.
I can seriously say I've done my best. I don't cut this part out so that if there's anyone who knows I'm speaking a lie, they like waseme tu. But on every project I've been part of, I've tried my best to have people, one, compensated, two, fairly compensated, and three, just treated right all around, right? And I would say the testament for that is that we're continuously revising our contracts, for example, with Too Early for Birds. That's number one. Number two, I'll just give you a story, a very short one. We do Mboya. I'm on the beach. We're forced to come and do a reel. So we come back, we're like, okay, I guess we're professionals. And we're holding a meeting at the Kenya National Theatre. It's sort of a post-mortem before now we start rehearsals for the next run and just telling people to open their hearts and all that. And at some point, Njora takes the stage. He's like, yeah, you know, I'd really like to thank the production because like during rehearsals and during the shows, at no point did I go backstage and there wasn't water. I was like, yeah, it's like, yeah, that's
just something as simple as
like,
hydration.
who have you been working with? Like, it's water.
No, theatre is tough.
Right? But you see, like, people really, like, your cast shouldn't have to worry about water.
Yeah.
Right? But like, again, that's my perspective, right? When you're like, oh, say, ooh. So I think I've done my best. If there is more that can be done, because I'm not retiring soon, I'm very open to
doing it.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that it's not about what you have, but what you do with it.
Yeah.
What made you learn this lesson or come to this realization?
My work, but also my friendships and people I've met, especially in Nairobi. That comes from one big lesson, which is, I think, the biggest privilege, especially in this city, is access.
Yeah.
It's really what the money buys you, and it's access. And coming into, because I moved here at 16, I knew my Nairobi cousins and Nairobi people, and would see Nairobi, you know, magazines and Insider and the dot on the atlas. But then becoming a Nairobi person is a totally different experience. I'm losing my track of thought. Please ask the question again.
You say it's not about what you have, but what you do with it.
Yes. So there's being a Nairobi person, and then there's being a Nairobi person, and you start in Githurai 45, right? And the gigs you're going to are in these like posh areas. Like at that time, Westlands was posh as hell.
Yeah.
Right? So I know like, oh, you got to upper.
Too.
Yeah, but people at that point, especially when you're coming from a very particular economic or social class, people treat you a very specific way based on how you look and sound.
Yeah. Then the last lesson that you talk about is basically split into two. Is number one, where it is always sign contracts, especially with your friends, and there is the other half where it is give only 100% and nothing more, nothing less. 100 is enough. So I think when it comes to the contracts, you mentioned a bit where it's coming in, especially when you're working with friends. But now when it comes to only giving 100%, and to know at what point do you realize this is 100 and I should not go past this or below this?
You see, when you do a thing and you look at it and be like, damn, man, my time,
yeah.
Before you take the walk and you go make a cup of tea and then you come and open and be like, oh my God, what is it? Now, that's a first moment, like before you review the thing. That's when you know you've done 100%, because that's the person you can't lie to.
Yeah. So in the end, you finalize your letter with listen to Frank Ocean.
Yes.
So what does Frank Ocean mean to you? Or why is this so important?
My top reason is how he's managed to move from an unknown random boy from New Orleans after Katrina hit into one of the most successful independent, and by independent I mean creatively too, artists of our time, right? We don't have the same dynamics. I'm not in the same industry even, like it's music, but there's a lot of parallels.
You can relate.
I can relate, yeah, like how his career moved along with his business, like how his relationship with like the record labels and the big brands and all that, and how he managed to almost feels like steal his freedom away from that. So from the business perspective of an artist is that from the creative perspective of an artist, there is a vulnerability in Frank Ocean that opened up a lot of me, especially because I discovered his music at a point where I'd started getting these notions of what my art should be, based on labels that were being stuck on us mostly, like performing, sharing stuff would be in politics, or history, and people started calling us protest poets, right?
Yeah.
And at some point you start leaving the label. Then I met this artist who was smack at the middle of hip hop, right? Just, well, I mean, a lot of hip hop artists are vulnerable, but not cloaking it in anything gangster, including not rapping, right? Singing. And then I remember him coming out as bi on Tumblr. Tumblr was big at that point, and that was ridiculous as well, because like a queer person being so openly queer within the hip hop culture, and the hip hop culture has been a very big reference in my life, and still being able to do their thing, and with the biggest artists, that not just the fact that is queer, but what that represents, right? Like in a hip hop scene, that's probably the biggest hurdle you could have, right? The entire song is dedicated to killing queer people, right? So my question would be, what kind of bravery would it take to not just make the announcement? Actually, I don't think the announcement is the brave thing. The brave thing is like afterwards. Like I've done it, I'm still gonna do my thing, right? And that kind of bravery for whatever it is, like no matter whether it's a thing with my identity or my history or something I've done or haven't done, as long as I can be that vulnerable with myself and with my art, then
you're good.
Then I'm good. And last, there's a bunch of songs, but there's one just called Try.
Try.
And there's a part where it's like boys try, men try, girls try, women try. We all try. Like that's all we're doing. Like we're all trying. So you come to Nairobi, and you're trying to get into all these spaces, and there's blockages. So you go back and you're like, maybe it's how I speak, maybe it's what I know, maybe it's how I watch, maybe it's the music I listen to, maybe it's my people, maybe it's how I dress, right? So what you do is you start restructuring yourself. And then you're like, maybe it's because you don't have money, so you start looking for money. And then maybe it's because I don't know enough people, you start looking for people, maybe I don't have enough followers, you start getting that. But you're not funny enough, niggas need to realize I'm funny, right? And then eventually you're like, oh my God, like people are here all along who can do all these things. They most of them just don't know how to apply it, right? And you bump into some of the most talented people you'll ever meet, and they're like, I don't have a talent.
Yeah.
And it's not really like, I'm not even saying that to mock them. It's most people have the thing, they have the tools, they just don't know how to use them.
What to do with it.
Right, and that's Nairobi has taught me that a lot, because that's the entire journey I was talking about, advertising and all that is, and performance and poetry. It's me walking into rooms, in most instances, where I'd be underrated. Like I'd also underrate myself, and then slowly learning that it's the work I'm capable of and the things I'm capable of doing that bring me into that room and keep me there.
Yeah. All right, that is amazing, Ngatia. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's been vibes, it's been love, and yeah, I hope to see you again sometime soon.
No, like not talking this serious stuff, like funny questions next time, please.
I promise.
Yeah. But thank you. This is wonderful.